जङ्गल जसरी नै प्रतिरोध गरौँ।
ellenállni, mint egy erdő.
Gör motstånd som skogen. Résiste comme la forêt.
Сопротивляйся, словно лес.
Resistir como un bosque. El bosque como resistencia.
Forest qui résiste.
You know, we are like in an endless procession of acknowledgements. I have to use actually a sheet in order to be able to like get all of the names right. But it's really, really, really a big joy for me to see you today. I know this is one of the most vibrant of nights in Trondheim. There's a lot going on, lots of interesting things, and the competition for your attention is fierce. I'm myself torn between being here and being other places, so welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hanna Musiol. I am an associate professor of literature and cultural studies at NTNU. And in addition to my daytime occupation, my twilight kind of side job is plotting transdisciplinary ventures at the intersections of art, literature, technology, and social justice. And I want to begin actually by thanking Carl Forby, you know, the ever so generous interim director of Kunsthall Trondheim, but for many, many years, an incredible collaborator, a fantastic colleague, a curator who has been involved in various kinds of collaborations, as well as Catherine Pedersen, an assistant curator at Kunsthall, who accompanied me and taught me so much over the years. Just in the last year alone, we organized Welcome to the Wastocene, Spectrum Landscape, Census Archives Co-Creation, another event devoted to mass graves and toxic waste. We collaborated on classes devoted to institution, a theory space, a rebellious space like no other in this town. And also NTNU ARTEC, a transdisciplinary collective directed by the tireless Andrew Perkis, who unfortunately cannot be here because it's in Oslo, but he sends his greetings. Without whose support for the humanities, again, ARTEC probably would not exist. And I want to also acknowledge Sarah Brink, who's from the leadership group of ARTEC. For many, many years, we've been trying to promote these complicated entanglements between technology, the humanities, and art, and also, again, also building bridges between the university and the city. Our guest today is Dr. Pablo DeSoto, a visiting professor of architecture at the Federal University of Paraíba, Brazil, and now an NTNU ARTEC Artist in Residence for 2019. And it's a great pleasure to introduce him. I've followed his cartographical interventions and new media and theoretical work for many years. And even though we literally met for the first time a week ago, he already feels like an old soul and a transdisciplinary partner in crime. He's in town until October, so seize the opportunity, make sure you get to know him, watch what he's up to. I'm sure he's going to do some very interesting things in the city. Now, for those of you who missed the first workshop we organized on radical cartography of Trondheim, a few words about Pablo. He's an award-winning experimental architect or hackitect, a visual artist, a radical cartographer, and a visionary theorist of critical internet arts who understood the dangers of Cambridge Analytica back when we were still using typewriters and Cambridge Analytica didn't exist, some 15 years ago. And from the start of the internet's widespread use, he understood that in order for the internet to be used in emancipatory ways, we need to actually learn how to do it. And the state is probably not going to help us. And among his many achievements is his work in co-founding Hackitectura, which is a legendary, for those of you in media studies, a legendary collective of architects, computer specialists, and media activists who pioneered emancipatory uses of hardware, software, and the internet. And again, for many of us living in 2019, the presence of decentralized digital media platforms, as well as sort of access to open source mapping, is something that is very obvious. But I want you to think about, what it felt like to be doing this sort of work in 2000s, right? At the very beginning of the internet explosion. And Arquitectura actually envisioned those uses of the internet and modeled these practices of digital disobedience. And also, in more important ways, I think, they also tried to reclaim cartography as an anti-hegemonic medium, as a creative, emancipatory art, as Isabel Stengers would say, an art of consequences. And we now live in Arquitectura's futures. Some would say in Arquitectura's nightmares, but we'll try to figure out which way to go from here. And while DeSoto works with maps, he's not a positivist of cartographic representation. He understands that maps are always partial, always subjective, always embodied, always not neutral, and they carry a tremendous amount of power. His maps, interactive installations, and public interventions are not just representational, right? They're not just representations of material spatial architectures, but they're maps of sites of knowledge making. They map knowledge architectures, and also the way these transform the social political landscape we live in, and they structure the way we build relationship to these landscapes. DeSoto always asks inconvenient questions. During the workshop last week, for example, he insisted on figuring out, who labors so that our iPhone can listen to us. How do we map that? He also asks other inconvenient questions, what it means to map a space, a people, someone's political grief, a social movement. What does it mean to map the ever-shifting power dynamics, not just as a prospective surveyor or a neoliberal administrator, but as a citizen artist? I think it helps, of course, to have degrees in architecture, communication, and culture and theory to do this sort of work. His extraordinary portfolio showcases really, really many dazzling projects, speculative interventions, but also many pedagogical experiments and community, public-facing art and discipline-altering art editorial work. And I feel that time and time again, he responds to diverse cultural crises and environmental urgencies in real time, and sometimes just in time. When we co-hosted the event with Rupika Risam and Alex Jill, we learned that what they call this sort of work rapid response humanistic artistic research, right? So that's the kind of line of work Pablo's in. And he maps different sides of disaster capitalism and colonialism, of environmental injustice, for example, in the Straits of Gibraltar, in the Fukushima exclusion zone workers area installation, in the streets of global unrest in Tunis, Cairo, Madrid, Sao Paulo, and now the necroscapes of the Mariana Dam disaster in Brazil, the Amazon forest, and the north, our new extraction site, our new extraction frontier. But he's not only a chronicler of devastation, but also, if not more, a mapper of resistance, of civic disobedience, of human ingenuity, of imagination, of creativity. He's the editor of FODIET, Freedom of Movement, Freedom of Knowledge Situation Room, designing a prototype of a citizen situation room, and also after video assemblages, as well as a co-author of the critical cartography of the Straits of Gibraltar, which was exhibited worldwide. He's also a recipient of numerous awards, among them Lab Juventa Experimenta, Lab Cyberspaces, and Elinor Ostrom Awards. And most recently, the 2019 ARTEC Artist in Residence Fellowship. This fellowship is awarded annually to artists working at the intersection of digital technology and public and transdisciplinary art, with a slightly environmental bent, I would say. His talk today is entitled Resist as Forest, as you've heard, Cartography, Technology, and the Arts for New Forms of Planetary Caring. Please join me in welcoming Dr. DeSoto.
I have to give you a big hug.
You have yours.
So it's enough, this microphone? Yes. Many thanks for coming. I'm extremely grateful to Hanna, to all the NTNU crew, like Sarah, Thomas, Andrew, and also to my amazing assistants Ray and Bilde, and also to Carl and all the people here in the Kunsthall. It's also like a big honor to be doing this lecture in the context of PRK exhibition, and also it's a challenge to talk tonight in this Kulturnatt after last year's talk by Marco Armiero. I don't know if you were here last year, but I guess he did an amazing talk about guerrilla narratives. So the title of my talk is Resistance Forest, Cartography, Tech, and the Arts for New Forms of Planetary Caring. I'm gonna try to keep it half an hour, my talk, because today the Q&A is the most important part, no? Because this Resistance for project it tries to be like a choral project, no? So hopefully we will engage in a exciting conversation. I want to start with a Arquitectura project, probably our most, let's say, successful and visionary project that happened as Hanna was explaining, like a few years ago in another geography, in this borderscape in between Europe and Africa, and between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. No? Is the geopolitical territory of the Strait of Gibraltar, where many systems collapse. No? Is the tourism, the globalization, the neoliberal kind of capitalist mode of production. And at the beginning of the 2000s, I was living in Seville, and Arquitectura, at that time we were based in Andalusia, in this place, in this region in Spain that has this Arab name. At that time, year 2000, the refugee crisis started dramatically. No? I think you are familiar with the image below, no? This Kurdish child, but this image of sub-Saharan bodies on the beach after they say dying while trying to cross the border was becoming a reality already almost 20 years ago if you were living in southern Spain. So as at that time also we were Arquitectura, we were very much influenced by the thought of Deleuze Guattari, and they are proposing that social movements should appropriate the means of map making, cartography for their own purpose. The maps not being used by the ones who have the power, but by the social movement. No? So we said, okay, let's try to map that geopolitical territory. No? And we did this map that I think it has been our most, let's say, successful project ever. No? We did it in 2004. We wanted to map all those systems collapsing. No? And to map, let's say, the border, not as the periphery, but as the center. If you see the same color is for Africa, for Spain, we are not lining political borders, but we were trying to think as a kind of as a system. No? And what was the new phenomena that were happening at that historical period, let's say year 2000. Now, what was happening in 2000? It was when neoliberal globalization was extremely solid. It was the time when the war on terror started. It was also the time where there was terrorist attacks in Madrid, people coming specifically from the state of Gibraltar. And also it was a time where European Union was building its Fortress Europe. And Fortress Europe basically means a set of technologies that Spain was pioneering, specifically one technology that was called exterior surveillance system, that was basically to create an electronic wall. Basically, previous technologies as radars, they were not able to track boat people, and there was a new technology that was invented basically to detect the heat of bodies in small boats. And it's the system that you can see there. No, so we started to map that. Of course, with this new system, migrants' routes started to be much more dangerous. As you see, the closest point in between Europe and Africa was 14 kilometers. When Spain started to install this electronic wall, then the migrants were forced to take longer routes. So the Mediterranean Sea started to become like a mass graveyard. No? Now, no one knows exactly how many people have died while crossing, but it's in big numbers. No? And of course, there was another kind of new typology, in this case building, that was detention centers. Basically, detention centers are like prisons for migrants. And this was quite a new kind of infrastructure that happened in the United States, in Australia, and in Europe. As you know, so there are like migrants that they are trapped in those buildings for years without having committed any crime, just because they were moving from A to B on Earth. So our idea with this map was to map this complexity of neoliberal globalization, but also like to map the border as a space where there is a low intensity war against migrants. Okay. But also we didn't want to keep only this kind of sad, like to map empire, no? in hard and negative terms. We also wanted to map resistance. So this other part of the map was the way social movements they were interacting in that. They were creating connections in between groups in both shores. Yeah, okay. And what this was the cartography and what did we do in terms of technology? We say, okay, let's do something. Let's invent another use of technology in the border. And at that time, there was this new technology called Wi-Fi that now is very, now it's nothing. Wi-Fi is all around. No? But in year 2004, 2003, wireless was something new. Even the computers, they were not by default with Wi-Fi. You have to buy a specific card, okay? And we say, okay, let's, in this militarized, in this codified territory where there is this surveillance system, let's make, instead of a wall, let's make a bridge. So we did a kind of, we said, let's try to do a wireless link. And we did a wireless link in between, we did the two shores, but also in the context of a gathering that was kind of joining together activists and artists and social scientists from both sides of the straits. But we were doing a simultaneous event, two sides. Most of the people were in Tarifa in the north, but also there was a kind of a group of people that were in Tangier. As you see, that picture on above is Tangier, and this is Tarifa. And it was called Fadaiyat, which in Arabic means through spaces. So it's a word that is used to name, like, let's say, the whole of communication in the spectrum, but also let's say, the magic carpet in Arabian Nights. We took that word from a Moroccan writer called Fatima Mernissi. Okay, so now fast forward to the future, to the present. So this NTNU Artist in Residence, let's say, award, or let's say, I'm here. No, so then, from the beginning, Hanna and Andrew say, we have this amazing infrastructure. We have this amazing technological public space that is Adresa Parken, which somehow is exactly the kind of project that Arquitectura we were thinking about. No? We did some projects in Paris. We did a project called Wiki Plaza, which is totally the same kind of approach that Adresa Parken, basically like an open commons with hardware and software in the public space. So you amplify the experience of public space through technology, no? And this is the amazing kind of, if you're an architect like me, this is the kind of project that I want to really deal with, no? Where you have sensors, actuators. This is gorgeous, no? And then, of course, the Adresa Parken has several sensors, like humidity, temperature, but also solid particles, solid matter, and it's amazing because there is an API that you can extract that data. No? So it's in that process, which is called like forest dieback, the Earth climate is gonna get into a kind of a turmoil. It's gonna basically, because of the way the carbon process works in the atmosphere, if if the Amazon rainforest turns into a savanna, it's going to have effects also here. So, I mean, as you know, with climate change, for example, for Greenland, to have warmer temperature is good for agriculture, no? And so people are saying, for example, if you think about wine, like Finland, Russia, they are going to be producing wine. And some areas in Italy and France and Spain, they will not produce any wine in the future because climate will be too hot. Okay, so we are in this scenario that is extremely serious. It's extremely serious. Basically, because as you know, the current government in Brazil is, I think I don't need to explain anything. This is Sao Paulo, I think 3 weeks ago. I mean, if you think about this idea this talk about end of the world is kind of Hollywood, but basically that was 3 p.m. and it was dark. And it was because a mix of wind patterns, and also because there were so many fires in the southern part of the Amazon region, that basically that mist was ashes from Amazon trees that you were smelling. So ashes from Amazon trees were getting in Amazon trees that are destroying like climate are getting into your lungs. I mean, as serious as that, and as physical as material as that. Already at that time, with Hanna, we wanted to work about the Amazon and to do something also because, as you know, Norway is a country that is extremely influential to Brazil because of money, because of the Amazon Fund. That if you are familiar with, basically the Amazon Fund was created 10 years ago, and 93% of the budget has come from Norway. 93%, 6% from Germany, 1% from Petrobras, to protect the Amazon. And de facto, Amazon Fund was working really well in the last 10 years with many projects that they were protecting the Amazon. But there were so many fires at that time that this article came by a journalist and writer called Eliane Brum, that she was writing that the Amazon is the center of the world. In English, when it was related later to English, they say, in Bolsonaro's burning Brazilian Amazon, all our futures are being consumed. And in that article, her speech in a meeting in Manaus, organized by National Geographic Society, that they were joining like let's say top journalists. And in her writing, she says, talking about resistance, for us to be capable of resisting, we must become the forest and resist like the forest. The forest that knows it carries rings within itself, that carries within itself both what is and what it's no longer is. We must lend shape to this political affective feeling in order to lend meaning to our actions. This means shifting a few tectonic plates in our own thinking. We have to decolonize ourselves. So then we took, let's say, the acronym of this project from this writing, no? Resist as forest. That was, let's say, unpacked in these main questions, no? With the Amazon converted into the central battlefield of the planetary struggle, what institutional and affective communities could constitute as form of opposition of the new extractive regimes? No? How to readapt the politics of friendship in the face of the violence of these regimes? I don't know if you're familiar with this concept of politics of friendship. It was coined, I think, by Derrida, but also by the daughter of Gandhi, Leila Gandhi, who wrote about the way during the British colony in India, there were a few British citizens that they were collaborating with the local people, fighting the colony, fighting its own country. People that they were into the institutions. No? Also, really like thinking about what does it mean to make a project here in Norway. No? How can the Norwegian support for the Amazon Fund be reframed as a response to Jair Bolsonaro? This is also something that is very material. The Amazon Fund has been 1 billion euros in the last 10 years, 1 billion euros. What does it mean? Like in material terms, that if this money is not flowing from Norway to Brazil, many people will lose their jobs. People who is getting 400 euros per month to, let's say, to safeguard the Amazon, or like all the gasoline, the petrol, the cars, the hardware, let's say, to track illegal mining, and basically the money was being used for that. And because of Bolsonaro, it has been cut, because now Bolsonaro controls BNDES, which is the main bank that was controlling the money. So now many small cities, they are trying to get, let's say, peer-to-peer agreements with Norway. Because of, if not, those projects they will be stopped, and then no one will be on the front line trying to save let's say, to resist. No? Then another question is that how can the same European countries further decolonize their politics? This is also, again, because Norway is not like, let's say, the good kid that doing everything okay. No, like Norwegian fund, investment funds, and also Norwegian mining companies that have caused a lot of environmental disasters in Brazil as well. And this last question, which is, let's say, the most important one, because of this is, let's say, what we could do something more specifically, is how art, radical cartographies, and technology can become fundamental tools in the making of new alliances for the planet. No? So this is mainly what the project is about, and it's really like a choral project, because it already started with several workshops in Brazil. For example, this is a course that I was teaching in João Pessoa, Brazil. It was like a one week, very intense course. She's a geographer that she was explaining about the way the technology that Brazil has to track deforestation in the Amazon. She was explaining how it works. But also we were like, that guy on the left, he's a computer scientist, and we were, I think you're not able to see it, but basically all these numbers are coming from Adressa Parken sensors. So we were like using the API. We were thinking, okay, we were like, let's say, studying, because also my question to my students, what can we do? No? So it was amazing. It was very, very rich. And for example, one student, he proposed, let's do a kind of social network that will, let's say, use a kind of aesthetic game that will be, instead of this algorithm that a few months ago become very, very successful in terms of we will become elder, no? And we will see our own faces when we are. Let's do something, I think, much more interesting, that let's morph our faces into trees. No? And say, okay, let's do that. And there was some colleagues in the room that they're working with artificial intelligence and neural networks. Say, yes, in the medium, we could think about something like that, to do some kind of plugin for Instagram, like to really morph our faces into trees. For example, you could choose like some of the Amazon trees. I mean, it's not so easy to do it, but this is the kind of imagination that the project is about. Like kind of think about radical imagination, also thinking about, for example, what software can do. Other student, for example, he started to collect the pictures of the main, let's say, rainforest protectors, no? Like Chico Mendes, who is not here right now, but who was an environmental activist who was killed a few years ago, and of course all the cacique leaders, no? And also coming to let's say, we are going to do something specifically in the public space in Adressa Parken in this period of the year. Then we found that a much wider network is, as you know, there are so many activists, many people, many citizens, many normal people around the world that they are resisting against this, whatever you want to name it, no? But from 20th to 27th is going to happen global climate strike, who was launched by many activist groups, environmental groups like 350.org and many others. And if you go to the website and you go to the map, you will see that there are many, many events already planned all around the world.